It was the fall of 1998, and David had just started his new job as the sole night shift security guard at the sprawling, outdated St. Jude's Hospital in rural Vermont. The hospital was in the process of moving to a new facility, leaving only a skeleton crew and rows of empty, silent wards. David's workstation was a dimly lit desk, cluttered with CRT monitors displaying grainy, black and white CCTV footage. The air smelled of ozone and stale coffee. His instructions were simple: patrol the floors, check the locks, and report any disturbances to the remote police dispatcher. The first few hours of his shift were uneventful, the silence broken only by the hum of the old fluorescent lights and the rhythmic clicking of the analog security cameras. But as the clock neared 2 a.m., the atmosphere in the security room shifted. The temperature dropped significantly, forcing David to button up his jacket. One by one, the monitors began to flicker with unusual static. The static wasn't the standard random noise. It had a texture, a pattern, like a coded message struggling to break through the interference. David reached for the monitor controls, but they were unresponsive. Suddenly, all 12 monitors went black simultaneously. A moment later, they reignited, displaying the same image across every screen: a single, empty operating theater from an unused floor. In the center of the room, standing beside a surgical table, was a figure. It was dressed in a pristine, outdated 1950s doctor's coat, but its face, it didn't have a face. Where the features should have been, there was only a churning, swirling vortex of static and horizontal tracking lines. The entity wasn't a solid being. It was a manifestation of raw, digital corruption. David rubbed his eyes, unable to process what he was seeing. The static on the monitors began to produce a low, agonizing hum that vibrated through David's desk and into his chest. It sounded like the screams of 1,000 old computers being crushed. Through the static interference, a voice began to coalesce, distorted and multi-layered, as if multiple frequencies were broadcasting at once. Patient David, prepare for calibration. The entity tilted its static head, staring directly into the CCTV camera, which David knew was located on the 4th floor, which had been sealed off years ago. He needed to investigate, but his legs felt paralyzed by a primal fear. Leaving the security room felt like a mistake, but David knew he couldn't just sit there while a possible intruder roamed the hospital. He grabbed his flashlight and heavy keys, his knuckles white with tension. He ascended the stairs, the sound of his own heavy breathing echoing in the empty stairwell. He passed through the silent corridors, the flashlight's beam revealing rows of dusty, abandoned gurneys. The air grew thicker, tasting metallic, as he approached the 4th floor. The red no entry sign was the only piece of color in the monochrome nightmare. The 4th floor hallway was pitch black, and the air smelled of burning electronics. The flashlight's beam felt insufficient, barely penetrating the oppressive darkness. David noticed that the old intercom speakers were emitting a low, constant static buzz. As he passed the empty patient rooms, the buzz would change pitch, as if the entity was tracking his progress. He approached the operating theater, the same room he had seen on the monitors. The heavy double doors were slightly ajar, casting a thin sliver of pale light onto the worn linoleum floor. He pushed them open. The room was empty, just as it had been on the screens. The surgical table sat under a massive, silent shadow, its metal surfaces reflecting the dim flashlight beam. David felt a wave of relief wash over him, believing he had hallucinated the entire entity. He turned to leave, but the heavy operating room doors slammed shut on their own, the bolt locking with a deafening metallic clank. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, a low, wheezing giggle erupted from the old cardiac monitor sitting in the corner, its CRT screen flaring to life. The monitor displayed the glitch doctor, its static face wider and more menacing than before. The image was perfectly synchronized with the other 12 monitors back in the security room. The low, agonizing hum returned, vibrating the instruments on the surgical tray. The static interference was so powerful that it made David's own teeth ache. Through the monitor's distorted speaker, the entity spoke again. "We need to correct the signal. You are full of corruption." David was paralyzed, watching the static entity begin to step out from the confines of the CRT monitor and into the real world. The glitch doctor's true form was terrifying. Its body was a churning mass of visible electromagnetic static and vertical tracking lines, barely holding its humanoid shape. As it approached, the flashlight in David's hand began to flicker and die, unable to operate in the entity's distorted field. He tried to scream, but the air was being replaced by raw static interference, making him choke. The entity reached out, its hand a blur of analog static. Where its fingers touched David's skin, it felt like an electric shock mixed with impossible cold. Panic finally broke through David's paralysis. He grabbed a heavy metal instrument tray and swung it at the static form. The tray passed through the glitch doctor as if it were made of light, clattering harmlessly against the tiled wall. The entity let out a low, screeching noise, like an old modem connecting to a hostile network. It lunged, enveloping David in a blinding cloud of static and horizontal tracking lines. The world turned monochromatic and silent, except for the deafening, corrupted frequency of the glitch doctor's presence. David felt himself being fragmented. David woke up back at his security desk, the TV monitors displaying their usual, random, grainy static. It felt like a nightmare, a product of exhaustion and isolation. But as he looked at his own reflection in the smallest CRT monitor, he noticed a horizontal tracking line blinking across his own eyes. A strange, metallic taste lingered on his tongue, and his voice felt multi-layered when he tried to clear his throat. He decided to call the remote dispatcher to report the incident, but when he picked up the receiver, the line was just a distorted hum. The shift dispatcher finally answered, but their voice was uncharacteristically calm, almost monotone. "David, you missed your check-in. Is everything calibrated?" David was about to explain when he noticed the timestamp on the main monitor. February 12th, 1999, 3 a.m. His entire night shift had been compressed into a few seconds. The dispatcher's voice changed, dropping several octaves. "The patient must remain for the full treatment." David looked around his workspace and realized that his desk, the walls, and even his own skin were beginning to glitch and tear like an old videotape. He ran towards the security room door, but as he grabbed the handle, the entire room dissolved into a vortex of static interference. He was no longer in the hospital. He was floating in a realm of pure analog corruption, surrounded by fragmented images of forgotten TV broadcasts and old security tapes. The glitch doctor was everywhere, its static face replicated on 1,000 floating monitors, laughing a distorted, screeching laugh. David realized he was no longer human. He was just another corrupted signal, a glitch in the hospital's broadcast system. Years passed, and St. Jude's Hospital was eventually demolished and replaced by a modern complex. The new facility had state-of-the-art digital security systems, and nothing unusual was ever reported on the shifts. But sometimes, when the old-timers were feeling nostalgic, they would tell stories about the missing guard, David, and the mysterious 2 a.m. broadcast that used to play on the old analog monitors. They joked that he got trapped in the static, a permanent part of the building's digital ghost stories. But they didn't know the truth. The signal never truly vanished. Sometimes, on stormy nights when the power grid is unstable, the main security monitor will flicker with horizontal tracking lines. A figure dressed in a 1950s doctor's coat will appear for a microsecond, its face a churning vortex of static, holding a clipboard and looking for patient David. And the new guards will feel a sudden, unexplainable chill, a metallic taste on their tongues, and a multi-layered whisper echoing through the modern intercoms, asking, "Are you ready for calibration?" The treatment continues.